Yes, my name is Daniel Moregard, and I work at a company called Paradox Development Studio, and I'm here to talk about a space strategy game called Stellaris. So first, I'll just very briefly go through who I am. I've been at Paradox Development Studio for almost 9 years now, and I've worked in quite a lot of different roles over the years. But more recently now, I've been the game director for Stellaris for the last 3 years. And I've also worked on a number of different titles that we have made, mostly grand strategy games. So very briefly about the company. We're based in Stockholm. Paradox Development Studio is a part of the Paradox family. We're most famous actually for our grand strategy games, such as some of the titles you can see here. Stellaris, Crusader Kings, Hearts of Iron, Europa Universalis, and so on. I realized that many of you might not be so familiar with what a grand strategy game is, so I thought I would begin by talking a little bit about that and explaining it, hopefully, so it becomes a bit more clear to you. In short, a grand strategy game is a possible real-time strategy game in which a player plays as a nation or as the ruler of a nation. Some of the key components for a grand strategy game is that you usually have a lot of different nations. So for example, in the game Europa Universalis 4, we can have almost 1,000 different nations appear during the course of a game. And this is important because having this amount of random actors means that each time you play through the game, it's not going to be the same because of all the randomness. Having an interesting game economy is also important, because a lot of players want to strengthen their economy, make important investments, and grow the power of their nation. Warfare is also an important part. Some players like to paint the map, as we call it, which means that you expand your territory and it takes the color of your nation on the map. Diplomacy is also important. You usually want to strike powerful alliances or break up alliances between common foes, etc., or gain some sort of other form of advantage. Culture and religion can also become very important in our games. For example, in the game Crusader Kings 3, or any of the Crusader games actually, culture and religion can become very important because in that game you play as a medieval ruler. Internal politics can also be very important in our games. Because sometimes if an unhappy faction, for example, they can incite civil wars or rebellions, or perhaps even usurp the throne, depending on the game. So grand strategy game, it's a sandbox, it's a storytelling engine, it's a geopolitical simulator, and much more. But we are mostly here, or at least I am here, to talk mostly about Stellaris, so that's what we're going to continue talking about. Before we dive into some of the details, I'm actually going to attempt to show this video.
The life I've lived. The things I've seen. Sailing through the light of distant stars. To see what lies beyond the veil. To learn why we exist. What is our place in the galaxy? I've heard ancient echoes of voices long silent. I've seen creatures of completely different origins and form. And yet, it's only the beginning. For our greatest achievements lie in the stars ahead.
All right. That video was actually from our anniversary earlier this year. But in case you actually want to try out the game, it's actually still on a free weekend this weekend. So it's a good chance to try it. You can get it on Steam if you want to. Anyway, let's actually talk about the game. So Stellaris is a space 4X grand strategy game with a strong focus on exploration. So I explained a little bit already what a grand strategy game is, but I thought I would also very briefly explain what a 4X game is. So 4X is a traditional category of strategy games, and the 4 X's here stand for exploration, expansion, exploitation, and extermination. And a lot of famous 4X games might be titled such as Civilization, Masters of Orion, or more recently, Humankind. So Stellaris is quite different from a lot of our competition because we focus a lot on exploration and customization. We released Stellaris in 2016, and we've released many updates since then, and we're still working on the game. Our last update was actually released just this Tuesday. It was the 3.1 update, named in honor of the Polish science fiction author Stanisław Lem. And yeah, we're still working on the game, so it's going to be a lot more fun things to be had in the future. Let's talk a little bit about customization, which is one of the most important parts of Stellaris. So one of the first things that you can do in the game, if you want to, is to design and create your own alien civilization. So the game features more than 170 different unique portraits. You can select or imagine to create many different types of civilizations, such as a machine civilization, a hive mind, or even a mega corporation. I thought we would take a look at one of the default empires that we actually have created that you can also play if you want to, which is the human start called the United Nations of Earth. So it's a democratic civilization that embraces egalitarianism, and they're also xenophiles, so that they like they like aliens pretty much. And the humans, they are adaptive, nomadic, and wasteful. I've also here have an example of an empire that I have created myself, which I call the Glimrock Fellowship Temple. So they are basically lithoids, which is basically rock people. They embrace authoritarianism, militarism, and spiritualism. And their form of government is a megachurch. So Stellaris gives you a lot of different options to create your own fantasies and to create your own empire. But another early thing that you do in the game is actually exploration. And this is actually something that I think makes Stellaris stand out. It's one of the things that I think we do fairly well. I also know that's something that a lot of our players enjoy a lot as well. So this can be pretty much how the game can look like in the beginning. This pale blue dot that you can see up in the northwestern part of the galaxy represents a new start. When you start a new game, a new campaign, this would be the United Nations of Earth. It could look like this. But the galaxy is randomly generated, and you start with a science ship, beckoning you to explore this randomly generated galaxy full of wonders and things for you to explore. So as you expand yourself and explore the galaxy, you will come in contact with alien creatures, alien civilizations. You will discover valuable resources and expand your territory to secure those resources. And when you come in contact with these alien empires or creatures, it may be up to you to decide if they will be a friend or a foe. And in this example, we just see a picture from the game with an example of the less friendly type of interaction that involves powerful lasers. Space combat, obviously a fun part of the game. Stellaris is not only a game about customization and exploration. It's also a game that is really about progress. So you will, as you explore the galaxy, can colonize new worlds, research new technologies, or perhaps even construct megastructures such as a Dyson sphere or a ring world. In this example, from within the game, we can see this theoretical megastructure. Well, in the game it's not theoretical because we built it, but it's a ring world, which is basically an artificial world built in a ring around a star. In this next example, also from within the game, we can see a Dyson sphere being constructed. So the idea of a Dyson sphere is that it encompasses a whole star so that it can consume, or at least take up and use as much of the sun's energy as possible. So for those of you familiar with the Kardashev scale, which is a scale to measure the technological advancement of a civilization, a Dyson sphere would lie somewhere within the powers of a Type 2 civilization. So the Kardashev scale was proposed by the Soviet astronomer Nikolai Kardashev in 1964, if I remember correctly. So why do people play the game? Why do people like to play Stellaris? Well, some people, they like to explore the galaxy. They like to uncover these mysteries and these wonders. A lot of people like to role play or tell their own science fiction stories, because maybe they are fans of science fiction. They just want to enact their wildest science fiction fantasies in the game. And with the large amount of customization we offer, there's a lot of options for you to enact those fantasies and to really have fun. Some players, they might just enjoy to, for example, conquer the galaxy, to instead choose to perhaps extinguish all biological life as an intelligent but very dangerous machine intelligence. So for each player, there's just as many options of why they enjoy to play the game. And that's something that really makes Stellaris so great, is because it empowers the player to have fun in the way that they like. So how do we work with Stellaris? Well, one of the things that we're quite lucky with is that it's quite easy to come up with ideas for the game, because there's so much inspiration out there. There's such a large amount of good science fiction out there, and we don't have the same restrictions that some of our other grand strategy games, which are historically based, do. So we are a lot more free in that sense. When we create experiences for the player, we try to focus a lot on the player stories, enabling you as the players to tell your own stories instead of necessarily writing grand schemes that we have written and designed. Whenever we create new experiences for the game, we also try to focus on strong themes. For example, when we focus on diplomacy, we try to focus on everything related to diplomacy. And whenever we focus on warfare, we try to focus on everything in warfare. And then we draw inspiration from a lot of science fiction. So I thought I would also talk a little bit about inspirations and considerations. So we obviously draw a lot of inspiration from science fiction. A lot of people on the team are fans of various science fiction IPs, and they're also very interested in space and astrophysics. Stellaris can also be very philosophical at times. So often during development, we discuss things like the foundations of reality in our own sort of layman's way. Stellaris is also a lot about the clash of ideas, how different alien civilizations can have wildly different perspectives, and how it, from our human perspective, can be quite difficult to try to impose, for example, human morals or ethics to an alien species that might have wildly different motivations. Realism is never really something that we strive for, but we do try to make things believable. We want to create an opportunity for the player to envision and imagine a future where something could be possible. Like a future where you could build a Dyson sphere and what that means for you. So related to these things with realism and the philosophical aspects, something that we usually come around to is that what's the difference between technology and magic? I mean, to some degree, technology would become so advanced that we could not distinguish it from magic. And one of those things is very important to us, is that we never really sort of tell the player. We try to leave a lot to their imagination and trying to figure out what this means or what happens. And another reason that I think is interesting in terms of realism and how it affects making a game in space is that space is really big. So it would not really be feasible to make an entirely realistic game so that you can actually play it in your free time and not have it turn into a full life type job. So for example, if we imagine a situation where we could actually travel faster than the speed of light, which from our understanding right now is doesn't seem possible, because as we approach the speed of light, the amount of energy required to accelerate an object approaches infinite. So at least according to special relativity, that is something we haven't quite yet figured out. But yes, space is really big. So even if we could somehow figure out a way for us to travel at twice the speed of light, it would still take us over 2 years to reach the closest star outside this solar system. So let that sink in. That's how big space is. And there's billions of stars out there. So yeah, it's really inspiring to work with space. And that's really why it's so, also we're thankful for why we've been invited here and why I have been invited to talk about space. Because we see it as a part of our mission to give people inspiration and to, let them imagine a future where these things could become a reality. So I want to thank you for listening to me today. And I hope you enjoyed the rest of the event. And also I'd like to ask you to please join the Q&A sessions that will be following this shortly. I think there will be an opportunity to do that in Hopin. And I believe that that should hopefully have been explained to you. But yes, thank you so much for inviting me.